Welcome back to BadgerBlitz TV, your Rivals.com destination for all things Wisconsin athletics. I'm Matt Perkins, joined as always by BadgerBlitz.com publisher and editor-in-chief John McNamara. Great to see you as always, buddy.
Good to see you too, Matt.
So it may be the off season, but recruiting season never actually stops, John. And the Badgers very recently have been adding to their number of 2026 prospects who will be taking official visits. A couple big names coming out on the board. Which one stands out to you the most of the recent guys who've announced that they will be taking officials?
Yeah, there's been a handful. I guess the one that stands out to me the most might be a kid like Sean Johnson, the three-star defensive back from Maryland, only because maybe he wasn't a name that's been on Wisconsin's, board for a long time. Jack Cooper's done a really nice job in that recruitment. So, a lot of the names that we've seen surfaced have been more long-term targets, I would say, for Wisconsin. But a guy like Johnson is a little bit newer, picks up the offer in the winter during that January eval period. And like I said, I think Jack Cooper's done a really nice job in his recruitment. When I got a chance to talk to him, that's something that he mentioned. Just kind of, he felt he had a unique style in the way that he went about, the recruiting process with him. And Johnson's an interesting guy, 6'2", almost 200 pounds, likely projects to safety, but can also potentially play corner. That's actually the spot that we have him listed at with Rivals.com. He talked to me about, coming up and playing a little bit in the box too. So he's one of the more interesting guys that will be coming up for an official visit. And he's coming on that first weekend, which is the last weekend in May.
I'm interested to see how the defensive line plays out personally. I know that both King Liggins and Jake Johnson have announced they'll be taking official visits, but is Titan Davis someone that you think they will be able to get in for one of these very crucial official visits?
I do. He's visited a handful of times, most recently in January for that first junior day. EJ Whitlow's done a nice job in that recruitment. He's a tough guy to, connect with all the time, but I do expect him to be one of those guys that, maybe hasn't announced it just yet, but he will be a guy I think that does visit officially in that late May window or, early June. And then you talk about the defensive line, Matt. I mean, that's a position group that I think they did a really nice job in 25. And then again, the portal, but, you have to do it each and every year. Not only a guy like Titan Davis, but Jake Johnson, I think he's emerged as, if not the top target for Wisconsin on the defensive line in this class, probably up in that top three. They've put a lot of effort into him. He was on campus in the fall. They got him back for the junior day in January. They've sent a lot of coaches down to Texas to see him, and he's quietly racked up, quite a few offers. He's 20 plus right now at this point. So I think he'd be a really nice tackle for Wisconsin in this class. You mentioned King Liggins, the kid that they offered after a camp showing last June. And now he's going to take an official on that first weekend as well. So, you're never going to let off the gas pedal on that defensive line recruiting. They've certainly been in on a number of guys, and now they're going to get some of those guys on campus in June, which, is obviously very good news because Wisconsin, has been able to close on a lot of those guys in the last couple cycles.
I think one of the things that I'm seeing when I'm looking at the list of guys who are going to be coming is I think I'm going to call it the Pat Lambert effect, because he's getting a bunch of these guys from the state of Indiana coming in. And I know that that's been his territory. A kid I really like in Tayshawn Bardo at wide receiver. But you look at the list, you've got, Blake Smythe, you've got Carson Elams. I think there's a lot of interesting talent that they are trying to go to Indiana for, which isn't somewhere that they've necessarily spent a lot of time in the past.
Yeah, Indiana's a more interesting state because of the Hoosiers' presence in the state now. They are all of a sudden, I'm not going to say a national power, but when a kid had an offer from Indiana in previous cycles, that wasn't necessarily deemed tough competition, but now they are making, an effort to keep some of those in-state kids inside the state, and they're recruiting nationally as well. So Indiana's a team that you've seen Wisconsin now be in competition for a lot of these recruits, and it's just different now. And they've emerged on the scene just recently, and I think they're going to be not necessarily like a thorn in Wisconsin's side, but I think they're going to be involved in a lot of with a lot of the same kids Wisconsin's involved with. And then with Indiana kids, you also have the Notre Dame effect, right? Where Notre Dame can probably pick off those top kids, the top kids that they want to keep inside the state. So, you mentioned Pat Lambert. He was, really instrumental in Wisconsin landing Eugene Hilton and Zy Davis, the tight end as well. So they're continuing on in that state. Carson Elam, he's a cornerback that they just recently offered. He's going to take an official. You mentioned Blake Smythe, another defensive line. Maybe he's a defensive end, can move a little bit outside. He was on campus. He picked up his offer, in the fall during a game day visit. So if they also already have a commitment from Ben Novak, the big. I think he's a guard. He could probably play tackle if you need him to, but he's currently the lone commitment that you have in the cycle. So Indiana will absolutely be a state that is important for Wisconsin in this cycle and likely beyond.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting just to see sort of how this evolves, especially in the wake of Max Steinecker leaving, because, he had his sort of pockets in his nest that he recruited really, really hard. Who's going to sort of step in to some of those spaces, like geographically, I think will be something that's interesting to monitor. I have a couple questions more for you about this 2026 class. And the first one, John, is you release your ideal class, or I forget exactly what you deem, ideal class, whatever it is, version 2.0, 3.0, or most realistic class. People are saying, national people are confused. Not want to say confused, but they're curious as to who you think the most important guys on that board outside of quarterback. Who is the must-get guy for Wisconsin in the 26 class?
Yeah, we had our perfect class, which we run kind of mid-month. Each month. So that's something that we do. And, that's something that you reference here. And then Greg Smith, our national guy that covers the Midwest, came out with his most important recruit for Wisconsin. And it's no shot at Greg. He listed for Wisconsin, it was Storm Miller. Wisconsin, has been on Storm Miller when I first started to talk to him really since 8th grade. And he mentioned that relationship he had with Mike Tressel. And obviously they have those connections to Ohio. I think it's tough when an Ohio kid has the offer from the Buckeyes to say that's Wisconsin's most important recruit. And then I came on the message board. I said, if I were to come out with this list, I would say a guy like Zach Washington. Not like he's a more realistic guy, but he's likely a more realistic target for Wisconsin in the cycle. He's a guy that Wisconsin has poured a lot of resources into, has put a lot of attention into. So that combination, and in addition to the need at receiver in this class, after going and taking just one in the previous 2 cycles, I think that receivers, it might be the most important position in this cycle, probably closely followed behind with running backs. So my guy was Zach Washington. He's another guy when you talk about official visits, he's already pegged to be at that first weekend for Wisconsin. He's been up, 5-6 times already during his recruitment. Kenny Guyton did a really nice job initially. Now that's kind of transitioned to Jordan Reed, but both are heavily involved with him. So he was my pick, followed closely by a guy like Gavin Mueller. Very similar in terms of the times he's been up to campus, the resources that Wisconsin's put in. So those 2 guys from Illinois are my perspective of the most important recruits or the most crucial recruits for Wisconsin in this 26 cycle right now.
Yeah, Gavin Mueller to me was probably the guy that stands out, just considering how many times he's been to Madison, how much, like you said, investment they've put in him in that relationship. So I'm curious as to how that will all play out. John, do you think it's going to be Ryan Hopkins at quarterbacks? If you were, Ryan Hopkins or the field, I guess, is sort of the question for me right now at quarterback.
Yeah, I would take Ryan Hopkins. And that's something I wrote. It's, to me, and you and I have talked about this, Matt, this feels like a 2 quarterback cycle. But if you go and you go and what they're actually doing, they might be approaching it as a 1 quarterback cycle. Now, if you talk to people, they'll say, well, recruit's fluid and we just never know. And all that, obviously you get that kind of stuff. But I guess as the way that they're approaching it right now, it seems like 1 quarterback. The new offer went out to the Bo Bentley, the kid from Texas, and he's blown up. And we just had a recent article up on Rivals, and he talked about 4 schools that he's really looking at. Florida, Missouri, LSU, and then there was maybe one more. Wasn't Wisconsin. So I don't see Wisconsin being a player in his recruitment unless something really changes. Peyton Falzone, he visited late in the fall, picked up the offer. That was a Longo offer, and then 3 days later, 2 days later, he was gone. Seems like Penn State might be the school to watch for him. And then the McWhorter kid, that, someone that Guyton saw in January, that one doesn't seem super realistic to me, although I think there's someone that he's considering. So Ryan Hopkins seems to me like the most realistic option. Wouldn't surprise me if he popped on campus for that junior day, and it certainly wouldn't surprise me if he took an official visit with the Badgers at some point, either that first weekend, second weekend. In February right now, what are we, February 12th? He seems like the most realistic quarterback target that I'm looking at right now. But that board could change. More offers could go out in the spring. But again, Matt, like we've talked about a lot of times, that position moves quickly. So, you got to get on these guys. And there's a lot of kids who have already made commitments. So I think Wisconsin's putting a lot of eggs into that Ryan Hopkins basket. We'll see how it plays out right now.
One more 26 question before we move to basketball. Offensive line. Back-to-back 5-person classes, going to be a smaller class, but it looks, there's a couple good in-state linemen that it doesn't really look like Wisconsin's going to be either going for or getting.
Yeah, Sam Simpson comes off the board. That's a little bit of a surprise. The vibe that I got from him was that Wisconsin wasn't going to be a slam dunk, and that proved to be correct. I actually thought that Iowa would be Wisconsin's top competition for him. Indiana comes in with the offer. Bob Bostad comes back to the state and lands him. So, I think that you can make a case of, Wisconsin didn't see him in the winter. Was it that they moved on, or was it that they knew that he was looking elsewhere? I guess we'll maybe never get a clear answer on that, but he's committed to Indiana. James Thomas, kind of simply put, I don't see that being an option for Wisconsin moving forward. He didn't take any visits in the fall. We'll see what he does in the spring, but that's not one that I'm counting on Wisconsin being involved in. But there's some other guys too, like the kid from Pewaukee, Tucker Thiemann, Ole Miss offer, Florida offer. When I checked in on him a couple of weeks ago, he said Wisconsin hadn't been involved in his recruitment, but I know that Wisconsin was at his school during that January period. Kid from Janesville, name's escaping me right now, just picked up an offer from Minnesota. He's a kid that was on campus, though, and he kind of had his own type of little mini junior day with the staff. So there are options from within the state. We'll see if another offer has to go out there. But like you said, Matt, they have a commitment already. I see this as a 3-person class, and the need now to me is likely tackle. You look at a guy like Maddox Cochrane, he has an official visit lined up with the Badgers for that first weekend. You go to the second weekend, Jelani Miller, very similar to me to Ben Novak in, I think he's a guard, but could play tackle if you needed him to. He's a big kid, 6'6", 300 pounds. So Evan Goodwin's another guy, the kid from Arkansas.
Another guy they've invested a lot of time in too.
Correct. So They are on some national kids, and I feel confident that group will shake out with some really good talent. It's just tough to say right now who are those last 2, maybe 3, but 4 seems really high to me in this group. I really think the number's 3. So to see what those last 2 pieces are, they're in on a number of really interesting guys. I'm very curious to see how those cards kind of unfold in June.
I mean, to me, I'm always watching the offensive line. That's just kind of the football person that I am. I'm always curious to see, what they're going to do there. So it did shock me a little bit when, that it looks like it's going to be just a 0 in-state line class. And we're getting more of those, I guess. It's still hard to get used to, even in 2025.
Well, Matt, this could be a 0 in-state class, because I don't know who you point to.
I haven't really thought about that.
Yeah. So, 2 kids right now, Simpson headed to Indiana, Thomas, and I don't want to completely cross a kid off the list, but like I said, I don't see that one working out in Wisconsin's favor. Those are the guys with the offers right now. And now obviously that can change. And if I were a betting guy, I'd say it does change. But right now, there's not a next kid. I mean, maybe it's Thiemann. Maybe it's the other kid that I can't remember his name right off the top of my head. But there's the Tyler Heinel, the linebacker. He's a guy that's kind of been on Wisconsin's radar. Lamont Hamilton, he recently picked up an offer from Minnesota. He's the ultra talented basketball/football player from Racine. So there are some guys. Maybe a guy comes up in June and camps and earns that late offer from Wisconsin. But as of right now, there's not that next in-state kid you can point to. And for as long as I've been doing this, I mean, this has to go back to Barry. I don't think there's been a class where they have not signed a scholarship kid. I mean, I'd probably bet my house on that, going back to Barry Alvarez times.
Wow. Probably longer than that, let's face it.
Probably longer than, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how far we go back, but I'd be willing to bet that there's been a scholarship in-state kid in every class since there's been printed news about it.
Oh my goodness. That would be 2025 is coming just at me way too fast at this point. That's something that's absolutely boggling my mind. Less boggling of the mind. Let's transition over to basketball. Nice little 3-game win streak going on, but a big game at Purdue this weekend. John, I'm going to start by picking your brain a little bit because I don't really have a great feel on this one. I feel like Purdue could win in a blowout. I feel like either team could win close. It doesn't feel like a Badger blowout to me, but hey, what do I know? I kind of expected this team to finish, maybe 10th in the Big Ten. So I really wasn't, I'm not the best basketball prognosticator around. This game, though, John, what's the one matchup you're focused in on most heading into it?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into this game, Matt. And I guess first I'll start by saying I think this is a good time. I mean, I think Ben Wargel, our writer for basketball, super talented, longtime guy, has been covering. He called it kind of the bye week for Wisconsin. And you don't really get a bye week necessarily that you think about in basketball, but they're not playing this week until Saturday. And I think that's a good thing. And then, you listen to the interview that Greg Gard had with Jesse and Zach, and he kind of talked about that too. What do we need right now? It's rest. So I think that could be a very good thing for Wisconsin going into this game. Mackey is just a super tough place to play. Maybe that's the biggest matchup, Wisconsin against the Arena. But I think it starts with that guard play. Braden Smith, he leads Purdue in minutes right now. It's 16 points per game. So that's the guy I kind of look at it. I think Blackwell likely starts on him. Maybe Klesmit starts on him. When Kamari Gee comes in, he plays a lot. So maybe you're throwing a lot of different guys at him, a lot of different looks. But he's kind of the what stirs Purdue this year. No more Zach Edey, but this is still a really strong team, and obviously it's a credit to Matt Painter and what he's able to do year in and year out. They lose some guys. Edey's probably exceeding expectations in the NBA from what I've been told or what I listened to, even though I don't really watch the NBA that much. I think that's a little bit surprising, but they've certainly reloaded, and they're in another position to be Big Ten champs here. But that's a huge game because Wisconsin, and like you talked about, Matt, I would have probably been with you as like this team might finish 10th in the Big Ten, maybe 11th, and they are right now. I think number 4 in the Big Ten. I think they have 4 losses. Michigan has 2 conference losses. Purdue and Michigan State have 3, and Wisconsin has 4. So they're in the 4 spot. And, it goes back to what we've been talking about. And I think the last maybe episode or two is, the job Greg Gard has done. I think he certainly should be in the conversation for Big Ten Coach of the Year. I mean, I'm just really impressed at what he's been able to do and what he has been willing to do in this class in order for Wisconsin to be successful. It's an excellent job. And I don't know. I guess I'm really, really surprised at where this team is right now.
Well, you mentioned Kamari McGee as a key piece off the bench. Is he the most important guy coming off the bench in this game? I think you make a decent case, especially if he's going to have that defensive assignment. But is there anyone else off the bench who you think really needs to step up if Wisconsin's going to be able to win in Mackey?
He'd be the guy I turn to. Carter Gilmore, I think he does a lot of the things that help Wisconsin be successful. He's on a little bit of a offensive heater where he's feeling confident there, but McGee would probably be my guy. I don't know how far down the bench Wisconsin goes in a game like this. Jack Janicki, I think, is there for you if you need him. But, it's really those two veteran guys off the bench with McGee, especially with McGee's ability to shoot the ball right now. That is something that is really, really improved in his game. So he's the guy I turn to. And obviously with that matchup with Smith too, I think he's a guy that, Greg Gard would likely probably want to have a little bit of run against Smith to show him a little bit different of a look, to apply a little bit different type of pressure against him. So I think they're going to throw a number of guys at Smith and kind of see if anything can get him out of a rhythm. But that's tough game, tough environment, really good Purdue team. But look, if they win that game, you're talking about Wisconsin seriously contending for a Big Ten title, which I think would have been crazy to talk about just a few months ago.
That is that's a pretty wild thought, John. It's a wild thought. We're combining Wisconsin basketball, maybe winning the Big Ten title with no in-state recruits for the football team. Two things that I very much doubted what happened this year, but you know what? It's a lot of things are happening that are new to all of us. So we appreciate all of our viewers, new and returning. Please subscribe here to BadgerBlitz TV on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing to BadgerBlitz.com for the best message boards and the best Wisconsin info anywhere in the known universe. Until next time, he's John McNamara and I'm Matt Perkins, and we'll see you in the den.